It is Tech Tuesday on the Dana Barrett Show, and we are gearing up for a big Tech Tuesday next week. The TAG Summit, February 12th, coming up, and we are going to be there doing a live remote broadcast. Once in a while, they let the Dana Barrett Show out of the house. It's kind of scary for everyone, but fun. We'll be there interviewing some of the big players that are going to be there. The summit is, again, this big event every year that happens. The Technology Association of Georgia puts it on. A lot of great speakers come in from all across the country to talk about what's happening now in technology and what they're looking forward to coming up in the future. Another big aspect of the summit is the induction of new members into the Technology Hall of Fame. And this year, Chris Klaus is getting inducted. And ahead of that, we brought him in here to chat it up. So, Chris, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me here.
It is a pleasure to have you. For people who don't know Christopher Klaus, he has been kind of a legend in the tech industry. How do you like that, being called a legend?
That's pretty
to your
awesome.
face.
Yeah, thank you.
Behind your back, we may say something else, but to your face, it's the legend. No, but so a lot of people in the tech sector obviously know you personally or certainly know your story. Our listener base is a little bit broader. So for people who maybe don't know your background, can you just share a little bit about, how you got started in this industry and why this is all happening now?
Sure. I think I got involved with technology at a young age, just getting into computers, computer security, computer hacking.
Yeah.
And while I was at Georgia Tech pursuing a degree in engineering, I had developed some software that automated what hackers did looking for vulnerabilities. And when I released it for free on the internet, I got a ton of responses and decided to see if I could commercialize it. And fortunately, timing-wise, it was the mid-'90s. Netscape was taking off, and every business in the world was figuring out how to get on the internet, and we wanted to help them do it securely. So I think from there, my first company, Internet Security Systems, took off. We grew it, took it public, and it just became a central piece, especially in Atlanta, for doing any kind of cybersecurity. Almost everybody in the world who was talking about security at all knew about internet security systems. Yeah,
it's almost like you guys were, the idea that you were thinking about those kind of things when it was like the days of Netscape, that rang a distant bell for me.
Sure.
It's kind of amazing, and especially when we think about how important cybersecurity is now, and how much we hear about it in the news and all of that now. At that time, you had to be pretty forward thinking, so obviously that is part of how you got where you are. And as you were able to kind of have some of those successes along the way, I know you've gotten very involved with Georgia Tech.
That's right.
And with a lot of other tech companies coming up. Talk to me a little bit about what you're doing with Georgia Tech now.
Sure. So I was fortunate with my success that I attributed really mostly to my team to come together and help grow this. And a lot of the team that joined me early on with Internet Security Systems, including my CEO, Tom Noonan, and many others, were all from Georgia Tech. So I wanted to give back and was able to contribute to a building there that has my name on it. But most recently and most importantly in terms of trying to figure out how to give back is I started spending a lot of time at Georgia Tech talking to students, asking them, what are they working on? What's their passion? And a lot of them had a lot of really great ideas. And I was asking them, why aren't you doing a startup? Some of these ideas could be a startup. And the culture at Georgia Tech, when I was there, even probably up till about 5 years ago, it was to get your engineering degree, get out, and go work for a large company.
Of course.
And when I asked them, what are the blockers for doing a startup, the number one blocker was just culture. They never thought about it. No one ever asked them, why aren't you doing a startup? Second biggest challenge was time. Going to Georgia Tech, not the easiest school.
Of course.
How do I do school and do a startup? And so we actually did something innovative that no other school has done to date that we pioneered at Georgia Tech. Is Tech has always been really strong with what they call co-oping or interning at large companies over the summer. And so what we ended up doing was hijacking that and letting them intern for their own startup. And so for the first time, not only can they get credit for interning, but it's with their own startup. And then so for the summer, they actually work on their idea. We fund them a small amount, about $20,000 for the summer, just to get off the ground, build out their prototype. We hook them up with mentors every week. We have speakers coming in, and towards the end of the summer, they as they talk to customers, try to get revenue, et cetera. We also then bring together a lot of investors all over the Southeast. Even some from the West Coast come in for what we call a demo day. So for the CreateX demo day, we have over 1,000 people show up to listen to these startups, talk about what problem they solve, what solution did they build. And it's really exciting. What we found is we did this about 5 years ago, and each year, the first year we put out a call for startups, and we got 8 startups to apply, and we accepted all of them. Last year we had 40 startups that got in, but we actually had over 300 startup teams apply.
That's so awesome.
Which is changing the culture at Georgia Tech. Meaning, if 5 years ago I would show up and talk about maybe my entrepreneurial days, et cetera, and very few students really talked about startups. And then over the last couple of years, they've been talking about startups, going, I'm thinking about doing a startup. And I would say in the last year, for the very first time, I'd had a line of like maybe 40 to 50 students deep in line asking me questions. And now the questions are more about, hey, I'm working on my startup.
Wow.
How do I scale this? Or what do I need to do to get into CreateX? I've got a startup. And so it's really changing that mindset from this is a viable option, from I just want to get an engineering degree, to I want to be the next person to build a multi-million-dollar business. And the really amazing thing is some of the startups now that have come out, actually we're finding in every batch there's a high percentage of success rate. And the success so far has translated into millions of dollars of money have been raised beyond what I was funding. In addition, several of the startups are actually on a very high growth rate. And like one of them did over $40 million last year.
Wow.
And this is all within less than 5 years that we've been running this. And I'm excited over the next 5 years
to see where it goes.
And we're scaling it. We've gone from, as I mentioned, 8, now we're up to 40. And each year we want to kind of keep looking at how do we progress with this program.
That is so cool. Obviously we could talk probably for a segment on each of the things that you've done over the course of your career and what you've got going on now. We barely scratched the surface, but we're basically already out of time. I just have to ask you quickly before I let you go, Chris, with this, being inducted to the Technology Hall of Fame, that's gotta feel kind of odd and good. What does that feel like for you?
I'm very honored and humbled to be part of the especially when you look at many of the other names that have been inducted into the Hall of Fame, and very excited to join a great group, and it's nice to get recognized for the legacy. We've not only did a cybersecurity, and from there, what was interesting is I could probably count at least 30 to 40 other startups that came out of the security field directly related to the first company I started. Now I'm on to kind of a broader set of startups, and I think it becomes kind of this family of technology leaders. And I'm looking forward to making Georgia and the TAG group, we're all kind of focused on really growing the ecosystem and making Atlanta one of the top #1 spots to grow a startup in the world.
Yeah, well, you're definitely on the way to that. Congratulations ahead of time for that amazing accomplishment. We've been talking with Chris Klaus, who is about to be inducted into the Georgia Technology Hall of Fame at the summit next week. The other cool thing is a lot of the other members will be there. So if you go to the summit, you'll get to meet a lot of the other members of the Hall of Fame, which is great. And if you were listening and you're a parent or a high school student maybe wanting to learn more about CreateX, we'll post a link to all of that along with everything Chris Klaus on our show notes page at danabarrett.com.